today we're going to talk about trying to maintain positive team culture through the heartbreak and joy of racing season. And I'm joined by Catherine from We Ride Together. So thank you very much for coming along today. Really excited to do this. We've started to have some more conversations recently between CrewLAB and We Ride Together through mutual friend and at US Rowing of US Rowing. I think we're really excited to see if we can learn some more about your organization, be able to share that with some of our coaches, and work out how to get the resources to the right people at the right time. So I guess I'd love to get a quick overview from you into and maybe a bit about your background, why We Ride Together exists, and what you're working on now.
Certainly. Well, thank you for that introduction. My name is Catherine McLean, and I'm the Program and Partnerships Director at We Ride Together, which is a nonprofit dedicated to eliminating sexual abuse in sport. We were founded in 2021 by our founder, Carrie Caring, and her daughter is a survivor of sexual abuse in equestrian sport. And through that peril and triumph, our lovely founder started this organization with the ultimate goal of creating healthy and safe sport cultures across all sports. And so that's what we're endeavoring on now. Ultimately, unfortunately, 50% of all athletes will experience some type of abuse by the time they turn 18. So this is a very important issue. And it's really important that we create safe and healthy sport cultures for everyone at every level. So I mentioned we started in equestrian, but we have spread into all sports, and we are US Rowing's official safeguarding partner. We're really focused on bolstering other safeguarding efforts that are already in place, but we really focus on that pre-abuse and prevention side of things. So that's really talking about awareness and education and working with organizations such as CrewLAB to reach those sporting communities and participants in ways that they already have touch points and exposure. So when we all work together to address this issue, we're decreasing stigma and all of those good things. So we really try to make safeguarding prevention efforts simple, bite-sized, tangible, accessible, because we know it's a really hard and icky topic, but we just want to make rowing an amazing place for everyone.
Yeah, very challenging topic. So 50% obviously is too high. It feels really high. Is the number going up or down? What's the trend?
I hope it's going down, but unfortunately, we know that abuse is underreported given the stigma and victim blaming and shaming and barriers to reporting. So it's really hard to get an accurate pulse on that, but at large, we really hope to see this number go down over the next few years. But this is not a new issue. If you look at current events and news headlines, it's been a part of sport culture for a long time when emphasis is placed on winning and high performance and not questioning actors in such spaces. Abuse can happen in those areas where travel is prominent and boundaries might not be kept into place.
So travel is seen as a key catalyst, I guess, for issues.
It can be, and we see this in rowing and other sports as well. But when we're in those dynamics, coaches and athletes can have those blurred boundaries that you're spending a lot of time together. Things can be more familial in some ways, and we're not anti having, closer relationships and that kind of things, but it's about keeping boundaries in those spaces and making sure that everyone's safe.
Yeah. Well, I love everything about this. I think, the idea of, I guess for injuries, we call it prehabilitation. So, I mean, maybe this is the idea of prehabilitation for team culture. I guess, what advice do you have for coaches who, I guess, they think everything's going well? We've got this concept of it being underreported and the idea that it's 50% of athletes. So it's probably most teams. And I'm guessing most coaches are going to be like, oh, not my team, we're fine. So what advice do you have for coaches who everything's going well? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like we're on a witch hunt or anything out here. It's these preventative efforts, protect coaches too. And we know that false allegations are less than 5%. And so it's all about coaches creating a healthy and safe community for their team and their local rowing environment in this context. And so I really recommend that all coaches, follow a code of conduct and have their preventative best practices on hand. And these are easy things like following the rule of three. So not having isolated interactions with athletes, but making sure that things are transparent and observable and interruptible, and that can keep everyone safe. And so I would put coaches on the offense in setting that standard and following the code of conduct and engaging with their athletes in terms of care and respect and having their best interests at heart, not only as an athlete, but as a human, knowing the incredible role and honor that you have in building up their life and their personhood and their athletic career. You have a lot of influence. And so it's really important that coaches know about that power imbalance that they have with their athletes or even another coach or organizational staff, and being mindful of how that power can put an athlete in a lower seat where they might feel under duress or coercion or manipulation at some points in time. And so I think here I would suggest looking at our coach athlete relationship diagrams, which we can attach in the show notes for
Perfect.
listeners as
Yep.
well. And these diagrams really display these unhealthy and healthy relationship dynamics that I was just alluding to. But I think being mindful of these things and about how we interact with each other on a daily basis really sets the tone and the culture for healthy and positive interactions. And then ultimately, when you have that culture in place on your team, if something isn't sitting quite right with someone, or there's, an offense or something, a misconduct incident that takes place, it's much easier to have a warm environment where that can be reported and people can get support and resources that they need.
Okay, this is my next question then. So say you're a coach and you thought everything was going well, and then an athlete presents an issue to you. You know, what's a good first step? What are some of the key things to do as a coach?
I'm so glad you asked, because I think how we respond particularly matters in terms of abuse or misconduct. Or things, might not be black and white, but how we respond really matters. And we want to make sure that that first response is really thoughtful and warm. And so we always want to start with believing and validating. It's really difficult for someone to come forward and to talk about these things. And so we want to make that a really welcoming environment. So we
Yeah,
want to use affirming and validating language like, I believe you, it wasn't your fault, things like that. And I always make the advice to not go out and, reach for a hug or pat on the shoulder after boundaries have been violated. It's really great to ask for permission before you were to, give someone a high five or even a hug, just, making sure to keep that boundary and put the person in the driver's seat even more about what they're talking about. And of course, we need to be mindful of mandated reporting and reporting practices that coaches should follow and all of that. And, giving that empowering back to the victim and survivor and what they need to do and how they want to come forward, but making sure that interaction is as positive as possible.
yeah, yep. I think, yeah, I think a lot of the coach athlete role is based on belief, right? You know, do you believe you can win a championship? And so, so it's nice to hear it come through in this sort of type of communication as well. What about if it's on a trip? I guess here's a bit of a curveball. What if it's on a trip, on an away visit? Is there a best course of action for that?
For if an athlete were to confront a coach,
Yeah.
I think, this is where I'd back up and recommend, first of all, that we'd have chaperones on
Yeah.
every trip as well. That way there's another adult for athletes to go to that isn't their coach, so that they have extra
Yeah.
support as well. And then here I'd really input that the athlete utilize the Courage First Athlete helpline if they're confused or feel like they are not in an environment or in a safe place to talk to their coach at that time, or they want to talk to someone else. And the coach can also use this Courage First Athlete helpline resource. It's a free, confidential number that's run by very well-trained advocates that can help answer anyone's questions about any abuse or misconduct scenario that they might be going through in the moment, and get on the spot support and resources in their local environment. So we'll have that in the show notes as well, but that's a
Yeah.
great resource for anyone to use at any time.
Yeah. We talked about the idea of the heartbreak and the joy. Do you see more issues with winning teams or losing teams?
I think that's the difficult thing about abuse, is that it doesn't discriminate. It can happen on winning teams. We see it at the Olympic levels. We see it at grassroots levels. Win or lose, it can happen. And I think, when there's winning or losing going on, things can get a little lax about expectations and standard about behavioral dynamics. And so we just never want to get too comfortable or resort to old habits or tough coaching or things like that that may not be healthy or helpful, but remember to go back to that code of conduct and our best practices that keep everyone safe and that outline our standards, and not fall on those in times of joy or heartbreak, but just have standards across the board, because in doing so, we're holding each other accountable, and we're making sure that that environment is conducive to thoughtful responses like we were talking about earlier, and enables us to have those hard conversations if needed.
Yeah. So we've got the idea of a code of conduct and chaperones. Are there any other really good initiatives that coaches can take to maintain the positive culture?
Yeah, I think, this is where CrewLAB can come in, that online communication and stuff too, that the rule of three that I was talking about having those observable and interruptible interactions, that applies to online communication as well. And so it's not appropriate to be DMing your athlete on Instagram in private, having those communication lines on group texts or group channels or group apps and messaging systems. That way everyone's on the same page. There's not sequestered communication, I think, is another great way to keep everyone safe.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth going back to the introduction here from Tom Rooks at US Rowing, was with the idea that he sees a lot of problems with the group communication, and we've had this mindset of, you call it the rule of three. We kind of have the idea of an open boathouse where everything's an open door. So yeah, I think there's the natural idea of transparency, I think, is a key part of good coaching. Yeah, so we like that feature of a thing. If you've got an athlete on your, if there's an athlete listening, if there's an athlete listening to this that's on a team where they think there's an issue, where can they go for resources or advice, or what can they do next?
First, athlete, trust your gut, trust your intuition, that little voice inside of you, that little feeling, that stomach ache, that headache, that skin crawling sensation, or the chills that you get. Listen to those signs that your body's telling you and your intuition's telling you, because we know often too that there's multiple victims per perpetrator, that there's a lot of serial offenders. So if you think it might be happening to you, there's high likelihood that it's happening to someone else. So first of all, trust yourself and believe yourself. And then, there's that Courage First Athlete helpline that I talked about, but I would really encourage you to check out the resources on our blog. There's specifically one called the Athlete Toolkit that could be really helpful in this scenario about learning how to say no, set boundaries, listening to your vision about what I just talked about, and finding a safe adult who you can talk to. And I think that these are really important things that you can do and enact in those moments where something tricky might be happening. And then also go back to those wheels that I was talking about at the beginning, and you can do a gut check on those wheels too and cross-check examples. Is this care and support, or is this power and control? Does it not sit right?
Yep.
And I always like to ask myself too, this interaction was happening to my best friend or my brother or my sister. How would I feel about it for them? And sometimes by depersonalizing it, we can really see it more black and white if it's okay or not okay.
Yep. Yeah, great advice there. So I do know that you're a roller. I'm wondering, is there maybe reaching back into your rowing background? Any stories, any anecdotes in there about maybe different ways your rowing career could have gone? I'm not sure. Yeah.
Rowing was one of my first loves as a sport, and so thanks for asking. Unfortunately, my career ended honestly before it could really take off, with an unfortunate injury. And I think that this question, thinking about where my career have gone, I've really pivoted into finding other sports that are more gentle on my back and different things. But I think there are many reasons why people can leave sport or stop sport and engage sport in different ways. And, injury, finances, your priorities shift, you have a bad experience, some of things that are more or less controllable. My injury wasn't, but
Yep.
someone having a bad experience that can be more controllable, and that would just break my heart. And I don't want that to be a reason why athletes leave sport. And so I think, really thinking about creating healthy environments and not making that a reason to leave sport is hugely important. And then validating each other when we do have to leave sport, because with every change there's grief and loss and those hardships. And so, for me, I had to find a new relationship with rowing, and that was cheering on my brother while he rowed in college and that kind of thing, and finding a new sport that is better for me. But I'd offer to all athletes to remember perspective, remember that there are other coaches and other teams and other options, but there's definitely grief and loss when things like that happen.
Well, great. Well, I guess I've got a closing question. So I guess a quick reminder. You mentioned a few of these resources, but where can athletes and coaches go if they've got issues and they need some help with what's going on their team?
Certainly. Well, you can find us on US Rowing's page. We have a page on their safeguarding site. And then also I mentioned the Courage First Athlete Helpline. That is a free, confidential, third-party resource that is wonderful to go to. And then please check out our website. We have crisis resources if you have any questions on reporting or emergency services, things like that. Additional resources that I was talking about, like those diagrams. We have blog, we have PSAs that can be shared, we have social media things that can be shared. What we know is that the more we talk about this problem, the more we can change it and the more athletes we can protect. And by creating safe and healthy cultures, we're ultimately protecting rowing and the future of our sport.
Yeah, well, thank you for everything you're doing. I think this is great, and yeah, if we can do it, let's do it, right? Yeah, let's make it better. Yeah,
Thanks so much.
thank you very much.